With adult lifestyles, there's a decreased stigma related to not living with a conventional family nowadays. So, like living single, maybe cohabitating, it used to be more of a problem. Your parents, maybe your grandparents, they wouldn't have liked it if you were living with someone and not being married, or if you were 30 and single. People didn't used to like that as much as now. It's more it's like socially acceptable. Living single, there's been a dramatic rise with this. 2014, 45% of adults had never been married. So 2014, 45% never been married. 18 to 29-year-olds in 2005, 48% never married. So 2005, 48% in that age bracket never married. It jumped up to 64% in 2014. So that's pretty high. That being said, though, the U.S. has the lowest percentage of people adopting a single lifestyle. So that's interesting. There are problems, pros and cons with being single. Some of the problems with being single, obviously, difficulties forming intimate relationships, possibly loneliness, maybe even problems just dealing with society in general, like that's more marriage oriented. Like if you have a couple's night out, if you're to go out with your married friends, you're kind of the third wheel. For example, most of my friends, when they got married, they just kind of disappeared. The life that they had before they were married was over. That was no longer existed. There are advantages to being single too. So you're totally in charge. You don't have to answer to anybody. You can pursue your own interests all the time that you want to. Freedom, essentially. Opportunities to explore new places and experiences. When you're married, you lose some of that. You lose some of that freedom. And again, it's a trade-off. So you're going to lose some of your freedoms and you're not going to be able to pursue exactly what you want to all the time. But now you are also in this couple, and so you get the advantages from that. With cohabitation, this is living together but not married. It is way up in this country. 60% cohabitate before they get married. And again, some people don't like this, like maybe your grandparents would disapprove of cohabitating. In other cultures, though, it's different. Like in Sweden, cohabitation is virtually universal before marriage. So in Sweden, almost everybody cohabitates before they get married. So let's say you do cohabitate before you get married. What are the chances of that relationship lasting 5 years? So you cohabitate before you get married. What are the chances that you'll still be together 5 years down the road? So you might think about it a little bit. Fewer than 1 in 10 and such arrangements last 5 years. So cohabitating, according to the textbook, cohabitating before marriage increases the likelihood of divorce, though those studies are mixed. For example, cohabitation is more likely to be successful if you are older. So maybe what they've done with this research, maybe one of the reasons it's mixed, is they are including 18-year-olds that are living together, people that don't have that solid identity that we talked about on some earlier slides. So again, a strong identity is needed for a strong relationship. So maybe they're including people that don't have strong identities and they don't know what they want from their relationship, and so they get into these cohabitations situations and then they bail out pretty quickly. But once you're older, you know yourself better, and so you know what you want in the relationship. So by the time you do cohabitate, it's more likely to last, possibly. Okay, so that's living single. For married adults, it used to be that this was actually the final marker of adulthood. The book doesn't talk about it much, but love being a part of marriage is actually a pretty new thing. In the past, you got married because it made it easier to survive. You were pooling resources. Now, in theory, you can do everything yourself without without having a spouse. Although people nowadays talk about how stressed they are about money and how they're more stressed out than previous generations, this is probably one of the reasons. The household income for a lot of people has been cut in half because they've remained single instead of getting married. Anyways, women's first marriage is at 27 and men's first marriage is at 29. 49% of people are married now. In 1960, 72% were married. So it's went down quite a bit. It went from 72% to 49%. Marriages in adolescence are more likely to end in divorce. So again, you have to have that strong identity before you get into a strong relationship. What women look for in a spouse, you might think about this. What do men and women look for in a spouse? You might think about that just for a little bit before I go into it. What women are looking for in a spouse. They are looking for a steady job for the man, and they're not concerned too much about ethnicity of the man. Men, on the other hand, they are concerned with similar ideas on raising kids, and they are less concerned with the level of education. So these are things that you want to talk about before you get married. So let's say you don't talk about these things. You get married and then you have kids and you find out one wants to be a free range parent and one wants to be a helicopter parent. That is going to be a problem, and that's going to cause your marriage problems and family problems. And so communicating things like that before you get married is key. A good marriage, lots of positive outcomes for that: increased longevity, better health, less stress. So good marriage is good for your health. With having kids, we've talked a little bit about this before. Starting a family earlier, the mother has more energy. Starting it later, you have more income. So it's a trade-off. More energy or more resources. It just depends on what you're looking for and what your situation is. On the divorce rate in the United States, the U.S. has one of the highest divorce rates in the world, but it has been declining in recent decades. The average marriage in the U.S. lasts 9 years. Most divorces occur within the 5th and the 10th year of marriage. There are several factors that lead to divorce. Youthful marriage, already discussed this again. If you get married in adolescence, more likely to end in divorce. Low educational level, low income level, having parents that have been divorced. So you might think about that. If your parents are divorced, the idea that maybe you will model the behavior that you saw for your parents and you'll get divorced too. And also having a baby before marriage is something that can influence divorce rates. There are some partner characteristics too that can lead to divorce, and most of this is common sense stuff. For example, alcoholism, psychological problems, domestic violence, and infidelity. All of those things can lead to divorce. Another thing that you might want to think about is an inadequate division of household labor. So the other ones are super apparent. This one maybe you don't think about too much. And this is something that you probably want to have conversations about, the division of chores around the house, so that one of the partners doesn't feel like they are doing more than the other, because it can actually lead to divorce. After divorce, approximately 50% remarry within 3 years, and men do it quicker than women. Why do you think that is? You might talk about in the discussion, why do men get remarried quicker than women do? You might think about it. Okay. Finally, on this section, the idea of rapport talk versus report talk. Men and women, they have different perspectives on communication. Women prefer what's called rapport talk. Men prefer report talk. Basically, women want to talk about the relationship. They want to talk about feelings. They want to do things like self-disclosure that we talked about in an earlier slide. They want intimacy. Men, on the other hand, prefer report talk. Nothing but the facts kind of talk. This is what I did today. This is what I'm going to do tomorrow. And these two types of communication are different, and you have to consider that. If your spouse isn't communicating the way that you would like for them to communicate, it may be in part because of a gender difference there. And it's something that together as a couple that you might have to work on so that you're communicating more clearly to each other in more acceptable ways for each other. All right, that is it for chapter 12. Again, it's a pretty short chapter. Thank you for watching.